In this interview series we call The Circuit, TechPoint serves up the human stories behind the major tech headlines in Indiana. I'm your host, Ting Goody, CEO at TechPoint. Today we talk to Mitch Frazier, CEO at AgriNovus. Part of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, AgriNovus is a nonprofit fueling growth in Indiana's Agbioscience community. In this episode, we talk about Mitch's career and his leadership at the intersection of tech and Agbioscience and what the future holds for the industry. Welcome to TechPoint Circuit Podcast. Today we have our honored guest, Mitch Frazier from AgriNovus. Mitch is one of our sister or brother organizations under the Central Indiana Corporate Partnerships. You've been leading AgriNovus for a while now. Tell us about AgriNovus, its origin, mission, and goals.
Yeah, Ting, thanks for letting me be a part of the TechPoint team for a while. And it's so fun to be with you and to be back with the TechPoint team after, what it's been 15 years since I've been in the TechPoint world with ExactTarget and Salesforce. So It's fun to be back together.
We still consider you a very important stakeholder.
Oh, it's so good.
And by the way, for everybody who's done, we're actually sitting in AgriNovus recording studio.
That's right.
Production space. So always thank you for being such a collaborative partner, letting us use your space.
Of course. So AgriNovus, part of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, much like TechPoint. We were founded 2015, 2016, really as this offshoot of BioCrossroads. BioCrossroads being the life sciences initiative. And it's funny, hindsight is this wonderfully clear view of things. You look back and go, how in the world did we not have an ag or ag bioscience focused initiative given the amazing strength of Indiana's ag bioscience economy? So we really started as this organization focused on connecting and convening different groups across Indiana's ag bioscience economy. And what happened over time was, Beth Bechtel, the founding CEO, an amazing job, an amazing leader, creating this groundswell of people who wanted to come together and grow this economy. I joined in 2020 amidst the pandemic, and what we really were able to do then is build off of that base, build off of that cornerstone, build off the momentum, and say, what do we go do next? And as we looked at the Indiana ag bioscience economy, what we saw was food was such a big piece of it. We were in the midst of a pandemic where you and I and so many others went to the grocery store and saw empty store shelves. Food was at the forefront of the news. We set a big target on said, okay, we have this asset, we have these people, let's go do. And so we've set this goal, we call it Grow 2024, a commitment to grow Indiana's ag bioscience economy by $4 billion. That's $4 billion in revenue. We've oriented the team to do that. And Ting, I'm so excited. We are today, as we sit here today, we have worked with our partners, collective partners at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation on projects that collectively have committed to more than 2,000 new jobs and over $1.1 billion in capital investment. So just, it is fun to see what's happening. It's fun to be a part of this organization. Oh my gosh, it's so fun to work with you again.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the background information and congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's a record-breaking number. Well, we'll dive into that later.
Yes, okay, good.
Before we get into that, I know you mentioned you joined the organization in 2020, right before the pandemic. And we had also chatted earlier on about your stellar career, really in majority of in tech, but also in the public sector, in the Army, for a while in a farm equipment business. And what attracted you to this particular organization, other than very eclectic, good mix of a career and experience?
Yeah, so I'm a kid who grew up in, I guess I'm not a kid anymore. I'm a guy who grew up in rural Indiana, Tipton County, Indiana, didn't grow up on a farm. Grew up with a significant appreciation for the agriculture industry, and truth be told, really love anything with a motor. Anything with an engine, I'm interested in. So, I joined the Army, spent 5 years active duty in the Army, went to work for the Army as a civilian, came back to work for Governor Daniels, got into tech, then ultimately into ag. And what I found was this is sort of the red thread that's woven throughout this whole career. One is I love, me personally, I love to serve. I mean, it's clear in the Army and clear working for Governor Daniels. But, when we were in ExactTarget, my commitment was certainly to our customers and to our team. Mm-hmm. It was about serving Scott Dorsey. I mean, Scott is one of those guys. He's one of the rare people, I think, in this world, certainly in my life, fundamentally changed my career, gave me a clear view of what leadership looks like, how to be a great leader, how to be a great marketer, how to be a great dad. I just love Scott. So you look at sort of that piece, and so it come from that into this notion of service now, which took me into ag. And what was there was this idea of, okay, you have this background in tech, you have this passion to serve. Oh my gosh, there's no place better than working hand in hand with those who serve the American farmer. Here in Indiana, the Hoosier farmer. And I got a chance to see, sort of that front row seat of where tech and the food system come together. And that's in the acres that we see here in Indiana. It's when you're driving north, driving south, driving east, driving west, wherever you're hearing this, watching this, there's likely a farm field nearby. Mm-hmm. And the amount of data, the amount of technology, the amount of innovation that's happening on those acres, it's amazing. Yep. And so when the opportunity came to lead AgriNovus, sort of a lot of soul searching, grateful for Gary Reynolds and the Reynolds Farm Equipment family for their blessing to come here to serve. It is amazing. This opportunity to work across Indiana's diverse Agbioscience economy. This is a $52 billion economy, really built on animal health, crop protection, plant science, AgTech, and food. You look at those four, the amount of opportunity for innovation, whether it's science innovation, go-to-market innovation, tech innovation, I think it's incredible. And so what drew me is the opportunity to do these kinds of things, to live my passion to serve. Yep. And what's so fun is, I mean it, is to work with leaders like you. I mean, you and I have worked together for well over a decade. I mean, yep. I remember, spending time certainly pitching you in startup companies, but also just, being in this place where we both care deeply about this community, not just Indianapolis or Central Indiana, but this community we call Indiana. And what a blessing it is to be able to serve. Yeah,
I can totally resonate with that. And we're also very grateful that leaders like you, prime years, right, earn all the great experiences. You can do a number of things, and you have in your past decade plus career. But you choose to do this and really can apply all the leadership skills you acquired along the way to both work collaboratively with a number of initiative people like me, mm-hmm. and more importantly, outside this organization, the stakeholders, because it's a collective effort.
It is,
as you pointed out.
It is,
and you have also talked kind of in terms of ag sector economic impact and the size of economy. You referenced the 52 billion number. There's the different elements to it. I know I heard you telling that story many, many times now. Every time I hear it, it's still very wow. The wow factor is still there. Can you just break it down a little more for us again?
Sure. So, we had never looked, and it's crazy. We never looked at what...
We just thought it was big, because you drive through all the cornfields, right?
And you start looking at this, and you break down, and you say, okay, well, ag in Indiana is this big thing, and then now this crazy guy's talking Agbioscience. We are intentional.
What is it?
We are intentional about Agbioscience, the use of the word Agbioscience, because it's defined in research, and that research sets out the components of this economy. It's value-added food and nutrition, animal health nutrition, crop protection, plant science, AgTech, and then production agriculture as well. That's the $52 billion. But what's really fascinating is when you begin to break this down, to your point. You look at value-added food and nutrition in Indiana. It's a $29 billion economy. Now, let me juxtapose some numbers here.
What is value-added?
So, great question. So, value-added, $29 billion. Think of this as anything farm gate to the dinner table, where some sort of value is accretive, right? It could be as simple as processing. Could be as complicated as food manufacturing. Really anything in between. One of my favorite examples, because I think everybody gets it, you've been to a Colts game or you've been to the grocery store, you see red gold. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily the red gold tomato production, but it's the ketchup and the salsa and those kinds of things. That's a great view of value-added food and nutrition in Indiana. One of my favorite stories, that I really like to eat. That's a real thing that we've shared. In fact, just shared lunch together today. Yeah. Cliff Bar. So if you're a Cliff Bar fan, there are 2 Cliff Bar bakeries in the country. One of them's here in Indiana. So that's kind of fun. So $29 billion value-added food and nutrition, production agriculture in Indiana. The thing that we typically think of when we say ag, it's a $13 billion industry.
Right.
Those are revenues of companies. So
those are out in the field,
right?
And we can see.
That's right.
Yep.
But food alone is twice as big as production agriculture in Indiana. And then we start going across. So the next would be animal health and nutrition. Think of this as anything from vaccine to feed. So whether that's how do we care for livestock, how do we care for companion animals, to how do we feed them and how do we optimize that feed? There's some really interesting innovations. Elanco, great example of that. Also on the feed side, you have great companies like United Animal Health up in Sheridan. So really cool work happening there. Crop protection, plant science. That's the third area of the innovation portfolio. Crop protection and plant science really is, you look at a company like Corteva. I mean, this is Corteva moving their global headquarters to Indiana this year. Just incredible movement. This is everything from the seed genetics. How do we optimize that seed all the way to how do we care for that plant? Mm-hmm. Corteva, just a global leader in that. But we have so many others in the state as well doing great work. Up at West Lafayette, a company called Inari, really focused on gene editing, not gene modifying, just raised a massive venture round doing some amazing work. And we have more traditional players that are leading some really incredible innovation in that space. Companies like Beck's Hybrids, AgriLion Genetics up in Westfield. So we've talked about value-added food, animal health and nutrition, crop protection and plant science. And then the one that I know is near and dear to our collective hearts is AgTech. And AgTech really is this intersection of hardware and software. And where those two things come together that make the rest of this economy work, it's the fastest growing category of Indiana's Agbioscience economy. And there are so many great stories. I look at a company we brought here from Israel.
Yep.
I traveled to Tel Aviv with Governor Holcomb back in 2018. We met a really cool company. Fun story from the tech economy here in Indiana. So I was Reynolds Farm Equipment. Selling tractors. That was the objective. And Beth Bechtel, the founding CEO of AgriNovus, reached out to me and said, "Hey, look, can you help us figure out some place? We're going to go to Israel. We'd like you to go and help us, connect with some ag tech companies." I didn't have the heart to tell her. I really didn't know. So I was like, "Okay, sure, yeah, I'll help it out. I'll help you out." So I literally Google ag tech in Israel. I mean, this is my deep research. I'm going to go make some big connections, and I had a list. It's like, okay, how do we prioritize who? Well, come to find out, Mark Benioff, now the co-CEO of Salesforce, Benioff is a seed investor in this company called Tyrannus. And I'm like, well, if Benioff is willing to put his capital to work,
follow the money, right?
We should go spend time with them.
Right.
So we went and spent time with them. Ultimately, they moved their headquarters here in 2020, and we've seen a really groundswell of folks coming here to have access not just to the talent, not just the incredible tech ecosystem that is in Indiana, but the amazingly progressive producers we have. We had a company we recruited here from California, a company called Intellinair, really amazing technology. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you see up in northern Indiana, in Steuben County, Ian Hartley and his team, a company called Traction Ag, really focused on building a better financial operating ecosystem for the ag industry. I mean, Ting, there are innovators all across Indiana from each of those categories, whether it's food, animal health, crop protection, ag tech. This economy is a place where innovation is happening. And each and every piece of that has a huge opportunity for AI, ML, our overall strength in software as a service here in Indiana. We are well positioned.
Yeah, certainly sounds like it, because what you're describing is the entire ecosystem. It's
Totally.
like we own the entire value chain in that way. That organizations like AgriNovus and TechPoint can help facilitate companies plug in and solving the right problems in the right ways. Yeah, that has tremendous value for sure. You have mentioned the growth area at Tech. Sounds like it's one of the focus areas you and your team are working on. What do you see? Maybe pull it up a little. What do you see as the sort of higher level, the most promising growth areas? Thinking longer term, the next 5 to 10 years, besides the technology disruption that's happening everywhere? Yeah,
I think there are a handful of categories, and maybe I'll put them into 3 buckets. One is around pure tech. So this idea of how do we use data science, how do we use artificial intelligence, machine learning to improve the food system? Mm-hmm. And, we've seen great innovations in this space, but Indiana oh my gosh, Indiana is so well positioned. You look back 10, 15 years, you look at ExactTarget, Angie's List, Aprimo, Interactive Intelligence, Emarsis, put them all in the same category. Those really all were AI ML companies, but we didn't call them that then because we didn't
call a SaaS company,
right? Call a SaaS
company.
Yeah, but at their core, right? It was how do we aggregate data?
Through automation,
right?
Yes.
And make sense of it, and then take the next best action.
Correct.
At Interactive Intelligence, how do we route it through the call center? At Angie's List, how do we route it to the right contractor? At Aprimo was how do we optimize marketing spend? At ExactTarget, how do we optimize and send the right message? We have that same ability. We have that same ability in AgTech here in Indiana. And our collective job is how do we go out and tell that story? So one area I see of massive opportunity for growth is certainly in pure tech. Secondarily, I think there's a huge opportunity in automation. As members of TechPoint, members of AgriNovus, I think we continue to hear this real strong push in the economy that, hey, we're labor tight. I mean, we are constrained with labor. We've seen big moves in this space. John Deere is an example. Made a big move last year with an acquisition of a company called Bear Flag Robotics, incredible company in California. And the whole notion was, how do we automate some degree of rote tasks? How do we automate tillage? How do we automate passes through the field? Incredible work. I think we're going to continue to see more and more innovators seek to solve sort of that operational challenge through automation. And so I think we're going to see a lot of innovation there. Again, Indiana well-positioned. Our strength in manufacturing puts us in a good spot. Our strength in AI, ML, SaaS puts us in a good spot. And then our just connection to really interesting producers, I think, puts us in a good spot. Third is this movement around green tech, around biologicals, ultimately sustainability. That's going to be a big driver. And it's not just a driver. Look, everyone, when you look at production agriculture, the pioneers, the true pioneers in environmentalism. I mean, the environment itself is their production ground, right?
Right.
So they are doing everything they can to take care of it. What I think we're beginning to see now through supply chain disruptions, through increased input cost is how do we do this in a way that isn't just more sustainable environmentally, clearly critical, but how do we also do it in a way that's economically sustainable? And so we're going to see new innovations. Corteva leading some really interesting work around this, around biological innovation. Great company up in Anderson called Hello Nature, doing some really interesting work around biological and biostimulants. So I think we're going to see sort of this green tech sustainability piece. We're going to see automation be a big place of this. And I think we're going to see pure tech, really those three driving the next wave, the next chapter of innovation in Agbioscience.
That's really interesting, particularly around the green tech sustainability piece. Because of market timing, right? We're kind of everybody's predicting or getting ready to embrace the movement for a number of years now. But to your point about the recent change or continued evolution of the micro market and environment, particularly around inflation, rising cost of inputs and rising cost of labor, shortage of labor really drive everybody to take now all of a sudden innovation and automation needs start to move up the priority list.
Totally. I mean, when you look at innovation, you and I've talked about this so many times. I mean, thank you gave me counsel along my journey. What problem are you trying to solve? I mean, if one of Dorsey's favorite things that he reminds me of is, what problem are you trying to solve? And, the two sides of the same coin, challenge and opportunity. And where there's this, look, inflation, I think the last number I saw on CPI was over 8%. If we look back to last month, the greatest 12-month inflation in food since the 70s, right? Those are challenges that are affecting homeowners, affecting everyone that's listening, watching. That's a reality. But it also creates an opportunity and a space for innovation. Somebody is going to solve that. That somebody better be in Indiana. And those that are listening, this is your call to action, right? To come alongside and innovate right here in Indiana.
Yep, absolutely. Well, you kind of already, so kind of now the growth area have been identified, at least on the higher level. What are some specific strategies that you and your team are pursuing to spur the further growth in those three buckets of activities?
Yeah, so we think of our go-to-market really in three key categories. One is around business growth. And business growth is really driven around this idea of We're incredibly fortunate at AgriNovus to have 30 board members who are highly engaged. And these are really the who's who, a coalition of leaders across industry, academia, government, going to them and saying, hey, what are you interested in? What gaps exist in the product portfolio? What areas are you spending time in? And then us going across the country and around the world to bring partners to them that fit that, ultimately with the objective of them growing here in Indiana. So that's a big area that we're focused on. That's what's driving.
Solving some of the corporate bigger challenges.
And it doesn't have to be the bigs, right? I mean, whether you're a big company, whether you're a small company, you understand product roadmap, you understand what your customer is wanting. And if we can help make those connections and be the place that makes that connects the wires across geographies, it becomes a really interesting piece. The second area that we're spending time on, second area in go-to-market, really is around startup acceleration. Our board, when I started, they said, we want two things from you. One is we want more companies here. Two, we want more startups here. Message received, right? So the second area that we're spending time on is startup acceleration. And this is an area where, much like the same with business growth, hey, what problems do you have? Let us bring you a solution. But also, how do we inspire the creation of new ventures? And so some of the things that you and I have worked on together, even in our short time together, are these innovation challenges. We just spent some time on hunger tech. We believe just like MarTech exists in Indiana, sales tech exists, fintech exists. We think hunger tech is an entirely new category of technology that needs created. I would love to spend more time on it, but creating the definition, like going to industry and saying what problem is there, defining that problem, and then using that as a real flashpoint, a really clearly defined endpoint to go solve. We think there's an opportunity there. We've done the same thing with producers, farmers. Go to them and say what exists, what problems exist on the farm, and how do we bring tech to it? So that's the second go-to-market. And then the third piece of go-to-market that we're spending time on really is this idea of how do we build thought leadership. Yeah. I don't believe that you can do a good job in business growth or in startup acceleration if you don't have a data-informed view of the market. You have to have some basis of knowledge, some basis of information. We conduct primary research. We spend time at events. You've spoken at those. But also we do some work in Field Atlas. And I think this is one where, if you're hearing this and you think, gosh, this sounds pretty interesting. I spend a lot of my time in software development, or I spend my time in product management. But I really would like to get more into sustainability, or like to get more into the food system. This is your opportunity to go see. It's a website called Field Atlas, and you can find it at myfieldatlas.com, And there, what we've done is we've said, hey, let's bring people who aren't normally in this tent and bring them in. So let's expose them. If you're a finance major, a marketing major, maybe you're early in your career in biology, or you're early in your career in even a lawyer, right? Like wherever you are, there's an opportunity for you in this $52 billion economy. And so we think there's a really unique piece of thought leadership to be really built around Field Atlas. And then lastly is this, right? This place that we're in, these conversations. We run a podcast. It's Agbioscience is the name of the podcast, clever enough. And that has become a really powerful tool. Just last week, we had the Deputy Undersecretary for USDA talking about this work around hunger that we've done. We had the Chief Health Officer from Anthem, now Elevance Health, talking about this need for innovation. And that's what it fires me up so much about our partnership and the work that AgriNovus and TechPoint can do together. Because the solution to the problems that one could argue are existential isn't going to be born by one group, one team, even one organization. It's going to be built by cross-connectivity of some really interesting work you're doing, some really interesting work that's happening across the tech ecosystem, across the Agbioscience ecosystem, across AgriNovus.